Welcome to The Economy. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas if I didn't get you in the last one. In the studio with me is Professor James Chin, a good friend of mine and also a good friend to the show. He is, of course, the Adjunct Professor at the Monash University Malaysia as well as a Senior Researcher at the University of Tunku Abdul Rahman. Thank you, James, for coming over on this very auspicious day. It's 2026. We've had a very colourful 2025. One would argue that we were out to go about our business on reforming the economy, perhaps even reforming the political situation. But 2025 saw a lot of dramatic moments in politics, anywhere from Sabah all the way to now, currently Perlis, where we might see the by-elections taking shape, and even Pit Bersatu against PAS for the first time ever. Maybe, people can have a very short memory. If we were to rewind back how 2024 ended before we jump into how 2025 transpired, and finally we can perhaps close off on how you would think 2026 would be. Can you remind us or refresh us what 2024 was all about?
Sure. So I think the starting point to understand Malaysia is that in Malaysia there's very, almost you can say there's no line between politics and economics. So politics and economics in Malaysia has always been intertwined. So when you want to look at what happened in Malaysia for the past year, you really have to ask yourself what were the key political events and how this is linked with the economy. So I've actually created a very short list of some of the key highlights of the economy. I don't think you can run away from the petrol rationalization. That was huge. The reason why that was a huge thing, because I think a lot of people in the international arena were waiting for that to happen. People understand that the current system they had back in 2024 was unsustainable. In other words, if you give petrol rationalization or subsidy, right, it is not a problem per se, especially if you go to targeted groups. But our previous system was that every Tom, Dick and Harry across the board got the subsidy. And the other huge problem you had, which is not widely reported, was that there was lots of smuggling. Because petrol was so cheap, right, people were actually smuggling Malaysian petrol to be sold overseas, which is unheard of. But I think the rationalization thing has been quite good. I think although there were some teething problems, I think by and large those teething problems have gone away. Now it's fairly straightforward. If you're eligible, you just show your identity card at the petrol kiosk and you get a subsidy. So I think the international community, commercial community were very, very impressed that UMNO has finally did it. I think the other thing that was much more important to workers in Malaysia was, of course, the adoption of the minimum wage from 1,500 to 1,700. I think that was really, really important because it sent a signal out that for the employees, they really have to think seriously about upgrading the productivity and the skills of the workers. For the workers, it doesn't mean that much because an extra 200 ringgit in your pocket is not going to make that much of a difference because cost of living, as you know, has really gone up. The other big thing last year or this year is really the SST. That has done well. Basically, I think the government has done some reforms which I think is needed. But in some ways, it's quite surprising. For me anyway, the person who's making the right noise is actually UMNO. They're saying at the end of the day, you need to bring GST back. Everybody knows, right? If Madani does more and more reform GST, as adding more and more items and everything, you will essentially end up with GST light, right? So you might as well bring GST back. But we all know that the word GST is politically toxic. So he may not be able to bring it back. Linked with this is, of course, something that everyone is very angry about, like the e-invoicing thing. I think he made a mistake by putting the threshold too low. I think the way with e-invoicing, if you're trying to make it more efficient, catch the people who, play with the figures, you really have to go after the big companies. The small SMEs, I think you just leave them alone. They've been squeezed really, really badly in the last 2 or 3 years. Just leave them alone. The other thing which I thought the government did, which was quite interesting, was, of course, the new investment incentive framework. Not much details have been released. They haven't actually told us what are the sort of key FDI that is linked to this. Because the idea of this was that they use a bit of the Malaysian money plus foreign money to go into new areas. the really cutting edge area. So Madani has not really talked about sort of the things they want to do, but we all know they're really big into what they call new energy. AI is of course very neat in what they call digital economy, and you can see some signs of which way they're going at the recent ASEAN summit when they talk about all these things, right? And I suspect Madani is actually following them. But by and large, I think the Malaysian economy, for the entire economy, I don't think we're doing too badly. I think we're on track for about 4.7 to 4.9% growth. Unemployment is holding really well at 3%. But of course, if you speak to the economists, they'll tell you that the problem with Malaysia is that the unemployment figures may not be accurate because we have two issues. One is a lot of people are not reporting. Secondly, we have a huge chunk of undocumented workers. In fact, you and I both know, right? If you and I go to any construction site in KL, you throw a stone, how should I put it? You're likely to hit an undocumented construction worker. So that's a big thing. So I think, by and large, I think we are in quite good hands. But of course, there were really a lot of missed opportunities as well. I think a lot of people thought that this year Madani will really double down on the things he wants to do with the economy because election is coming up. Well, I think two things blew up. One is, of course, I think he didn't expect the huge blowout that occurred when he supported the daughter to be the deputy president. That meant the loss of two senior ministers, Rafizi and Azmi, they left the administration. And I think he did not really expect such a huge blowback in Sabah. Sabah, right, 90% of the seats were won by Sabah-based party. But to be fair to him, in some ways, Anwar is also a winner in Sabah because all the parties in Sabah, regardless of the winners and losers, all of them were part of the Madani government. You know, the way the press plays it is that Warisan was opposition in Sabah trying to take over the government. People keep forgetting Warisan is part of the unity government in Kuala Lumpur. So whoever wins in Sabah, right, will support the unity government. But I think there's still a lot of fundamental changes that needs to be done in Malaysia. The key areas is, of course, we really need to do something about our education, which I know you're heavily involved in, which is really good. But the other key area in terms of Malaysia's economy, these two things have been sitting in the too hard basket for many years. One is, of course, the Bumiputera policy. People keep tweaking on the edges. That's not going to change anything. But the really difficult one is competitiveness and productivity. And despite all the new policies brought in by the government, right, the needle has not changed.
Let's talk about some of the pivots that can come from your opening salvo. One of them is, of course, the status of the economy. Yes, we acknowledge that GDP growth is middling or I would say moderating at about 4.5 to 4.7%. We're looking at the ringgit growth quite strong. In fact, I'm one of those folks that are betting on ringgit stronger than going below sub 4.0 and many more. Inflation is also holding steady at 1.4% based on the last number, and on average it would be about 1.3%. But one thing that I was looking out for in your opening salvo was the term cost of living. That perhaps has not yet been addressed or is currently being addressed, but we're not seeing the impact yet. We're also seeing that while we're managing the petrol subsidy, there's the whole notion of the 40% of Sabah royalty that we need to figure out the formula. There's also Sarawak and its quarrel between Petros and Petronas and many more. Do you feel that these kind of carry forward issues are going to perhaps translate into how the country moves forward for next year, and even how do you think the political landscape is going to tie itself up with the economic landscape as well?
You can't run away from politics now because election is so close. So the bottom line is that the recent cabinet reshuffle, you have to assume that Anwar is thinking about the next election, which is basically due in 2 years' time. So what are the sort of things linked to the economy in terms of the politics? With election coming, a lot of the things which they deem to be very sensitive, they'll push it away and say we have to hold it off until after the elections. But I think in terms of the election, there's certain areas that Anwar better, do something very quickly. One is the green wave challenge. The way to understand the green wave challenge is that it's not so much that PAS is pushing, it is more the fact that PAS has traditionally locked up in the 4 northern Malay states. So if you look at Malaya now, right, PAS has reached half, broken out of the 4 northern states, and now basically at Selangor and Negeri Sembilan. If PAS wins in the next election, push further down, all the way down to Malacca or Johor, right, then PAS will have the biggest bloc after the next general election, which means they are in a position to call Sabah and Sarawak and say, do you want to support me in forming a new government? If Anwar does badly, it means that he'll be ending up with between 50 or 60 seats, and PAS will be 80 to 90 or maybe even 100. Okay, so that's the first challenge. The second one, as you mentioned, is MA63. Not only the 40%, but the sort of things being asked for by Sabah and Sarawak. For example, 35% of the seats in parliament. That will fundamentally change the federal-state relationship. There's also other things in the MA63, like they want more of the decentralization powers going back to Sarawak. Especially the big thing now is education. Health, there have been some negotiation, but I was made to understand health is a lot harder. Not only we're talking about big money health, but things like specialists, all those things are really difficult to solve. It's not education. Education is a lot easier, and it's whether Madani wants to give up control. But I think there's 3 things that will have a big impact on the elections coming up. One is hate speech and social media platforms. Whether you like it or not, I think the social media platform, whoever control WhatsApp and the short videos, you know, things like TikTok, Reels, all these things, whoever control that narrative, right, is going to be way ahead of everybody else. We saw this very, very clearly, where social media actually changed the results of the elections. These are in recent years. One was Bongbong Marcos in the Philippines. If you know anything about the Philippines, right, you know that his father was a major corruption figure, and the father stole millions and millions of dollars out of the Philippines. And yet Bongbong Marcos, primarily through Facebook, managed to win the biggest majority against his opponent. Okay, so that was done by Facebook. And recently in Indonesia, right, Prabowo won by a substantive majority, again due to AI, basically, you know, making him into a chubby grandfather-like figure, dancing, you know, rewriting his entire history. Most people forgot, right, he was the head of the Indonesian Special Forces and did a lot of bad things in East Timor before East Timor became independent. And in fact, the American banned him from visiting America because of East Timor, and yet he won the election. So next election, I can guarantee you, right, AI will be used extensively, especially AI video. You've already seen some of this, but the sort of stuff that you're seeing today, right, is nothing that will appear, say, during the general elections. And this is where the problem lies, because a lot of people in Malaysia, right, can't tell the difference. Sometimes even I can't tell the difference. And the thing about social media, the reason why it's so effective is because you tend to believe it because I send it to you through WhatsApp, or you belong to the same WhatsApp group where people share videos. The thing about the video thing is that once you see it, you can't unsee it. So once you see it, it doesn't matter if I send you another WhatsApp and say, oh, Ibrahim, please ignore it, that was fake.
Yeah.
You will still remember it. So that's why social media is going to be such an important role. And interestingly enough, the Malaysian government backed down. You remember a lot of the major platforms refused to register, and our friend was forced to say that they'll be automatically registered on the platforms. So it means that the social media platforms, they don't really care what is happening in Malaysia, partly because Malaysia is a small country, small revenue base for them, but also a lot of these companies, right, people don't realize they actually like seeing all these fake videos floating around.
Yeah, because rage equals attention, equals engagement.
Yes, but more importantly, right, countries like Malaysia, which is quite technologically advanced, but also many parts of Malaysia, so they're underdeveloped, they have a chance to see the effects of both areas. In the same community, with the same political culture, one in the rural area, which we might call developing country, and one like Klang Valley, which is a first world country. So, you know, it provides opportunities for them to study. The bottom line is that, you know, if the Malaysian government thinks that they can control social media for the elections, forget it. Nobody can control it.
So that means candidates must be a little bit smarter, a little bit more crafty in terms of how they message their own electorates.
No, we're talking about private companies hired by the major political parties to push a certain narrative. Now, I've seen some of these companies from West Malaysia operating in Sabah. A lot of them did it wrong because you need the local context. So if they want to get it right, they need local experts to do this sort of thing. Because a lot of things in Malaysia, right, there's lots of subtleties involved. So for example, if you bring a foreign expert doing this sort of video about how great the Madani government is doing, I'll just give you an example. You may end up doing a video saying that, oh, Malaysia has finally caught up with Singapore in such and such a thing. But as a local person, right, you know immediately the context. Malaysians don't like the success of Singapore. So you don't mention Singapore in the first place, right? But if you're a foreigner, expert in this sort of social media stuff, right, you probably won't do a good job. So if those political parties are watching this now, I would tell them, please hire local people if you want your social media platform to be very successful. Among all the major political parties, the one that's doing very badly is actually PH. So it's interesting that on the other side of Perikatan, right, PAS is doing very well on social media. If you look at some of the videos they produce for TikTok, right, they get millions of views, which is remarkable. And all those are done by unpaid professionals who are supporting PAS. So it's quite interesting that, PAS, which you think Islamic party don't like all this modern stuff, they are the trend leaders instead of in terms of TikTok videos, which is interesting. Another two things I think that Madani has to deal with, race relations. I think race relations between the different major groups on the Malaya side, I think relationship has gotten worse since Madani came in. And the other big thing that Madani has to deal with is the the US-China competition over Russia and Ukraine. I think you can't run away from this. This will have a major impact on Malaysia. And if he doesn't handle it correctly, it will blow up. And it will blow up in the election as well. Because we saw, right, when he was the chairman of ASEAN, there was a big ceremony signing two things that Trump was very happy about. One was that he was the peacemaker for Cambodia and Thailand, which blew up already. Yeah. Madani was sitting in the middle as the witness. And the second thing that Madani did was that he signed this sort of a trade framework. And right, a lot of Malaysians are unhappy about it because they don't understand it. And some of the Malaysian NGOs are even talking about suing Madani to get to the bottom of this. Now, all these things, right, that time, right, with the way it works in our society is that people talk about this issue, brew, and then election time, boom.
Yeah, there's a lag effect.
That's right. So this US-Malaysia trade framework, right, I can tell you, right, is a grenade waiting to happen. Because everyone is looking for that specific clause or specific example where it shows that the US is colonizing Malaysia by telling Malaysia got to do this. Yeah. So far, there's no smoking gun yet, but people are looking for it.
Let's talk about the political risk when it comes to the economy. Do you feel that that political risk is now attached with some sort of a premium instead of discounted now? Do you feel that investors, both internationally and domestically as well, and our own little business owners here in Malaysia, are looking at this with serious intent, that they might look at our economy going strong for 2025, but for this year in 2026, there's a lot of hesitation now, there's a lot of wait and see. How do you view the situation of investors looking in towards Malaysia?
So generally, there's two types of investments. One is those who are already here, who want to expand or do a major expansion. Those guys don't really care about what happens in Putrajaya. They do care, but I'm saying that they care less than the new investments coming in. For the new investments coming in, they'll be talking to people like yourself and asking, is the government committed to rational policy making process? Like I said, the problem in Malaysia is that you got this racial thing, race relations, which affects public policy. So that's the thing they're looking for. The secondly is that Malaysia can overcome this by going for big projects where the sort of political turbulence is sort of independent. So example of that is that we're building a lot of data centers in Johor. Those sort of investments, right, they don't worry too much about political turbulence. What they worry about is whether they can supply cheap electricity and water.
Yeah.
So those things are unlikely.
But those two are baked into the agreement already.
But those things are not likely to be changed if a government change.
Yeah.
Right? So those things can go ahead. But the sort of things, investments where the foreign investors are very worried about, right, are things which deals with things like consumer product, all this sort of thing. A new government can clamp down. One of the problems with Malaysia, right, is that we are a society where almost everything a businessman wants to do, right, requires a license or some sort of paperwork. And this is what investors don't like, because paperwork can be changed anytime, especially at the lower level. So, you know, that's the reason why they like continuity. So, you know, for those investors, I think if I were them, right, I would tell them, don't do anything now, wait until the end of 2026, then the picture is clearer, which side is more likely to win.
But if, let's say, Perikatan wants to move in and perhaps even win the election in a big way, isn't it in their interest to also be investor-friendly and to stay within the whole notion of being political, being economically driven rather than ideologically driven? Because at the end of the day, it's the bread and butter issues that matter most. Ideological is nice to have, but, you know, money in the wallet is much more important.
Yes. That, again, is the rational explanation. But in Malaysia, right, a lot of things is irrational. So you gave me a very good question, a very important question, which is that, you know, on paper, even if the other side get in, they want to be rational because they want the economy to grow. That is not the problem. The problem is that if I have a major multi-billion ringgit investment in this country, right, in almost all cases, well, in fact, in all cases, I will have a local partner to help me to smooth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Change of government means that that partner cannot use anymore.
Find new partner lah.
So, it's not so easy, right? So this is what I mean by the risk. Okay? So, you know, the professional advice most of them will be getting is that, you know, wait for a little while, because by the end of 2026, they have a very clear idea. So it is not so much that the new government is not interested in growing the economy. Of course they're interested in growing the economy. Clan Valley, all this sort of thing. It's the problem of the foreign investors that they have to find a whole new set of partners to deal with the new government.
And they'd rather save themselves the trouble and perhaps...
No, it's not only save the trouble. How should I put it? You know, this is the sort of thing that foreign investments, the big one, they don't like, because they're used to getting VIP treatment from the rest of the region and everywhere, right? There's a very famous story coming out of Vietnam where a very important VIP linked to the US administration now, they managed to get a project, you know, get through in 2 weeks. The reason why all the paperwork was done in 2 weeks, right, you can Google this, was because the son of the figure linked to the US administration was coming for a site visit. So everything will smooth away. But they're willing to do that because they know this US administration will not change for the next 3 years.
But there was a hot mic as well with the Prabowo talking to President Donald Trump about wanting to meet Trump Jr.
Yes.
I mean, things like this, you know what I mean?
Because, you know, the big project, like I said, the local partner is crucial. He is the one who smooth everything out for you. You bring in the big money, set up the big operation, whatever it is, but it is the local guy. So if the change in the top of the political tree, right, then whoever you're dealing with, usually you can't use that person with the new administration. Let's
talk about the timeline and the permutations, because we have the venerable Mr. Professor James in the house. Is it this year, the general election?
I don't know. I think anybody who tries to second guess what Madani is thinking, I think it's a very foolish exercise, because you don't know all his calculations, because he's got so many things to calculate, in the sense that he not only had to calculate the number of seats, how to divide it among his coalition, but more importantly, right, he has to calculate what is the mood of the Malay voters who voted for the first or second time for PAS. This is the target group that he's after, because these were the target group that supported the Green Wave. He's trying to claw back the Green Wave. Everybody knows that. I mean, you know, I think anybody who tells you that, you know, he doesn't care about the Green Wave, this is a very silly statement. He's definitely going after the Green Wave. You can see a lot of actions he does, giving increased funding to JAKIM, appointing a more assertive religious minister, all these things. This is all about the Green Wave. Spending time in the Middle East, even though I can tell you, right, they don't take him seriously, it's all about the Green Wave. Now, in terms of Green Wave politics, right, he is in a very good position to understand the trend, because people forget when he started his political career, right, he was part of the Green Wave.
Yeah, of the 1980s.
So people keep forgetting the history. My beef with him is not so much that it's about the green wave. My beef with him was that when he and Mahathir, right, had a solid relationship in the 1980s, you know, they launched a program to be more Islamic than past, right? That program fell spectacularly. They lost the battle, right? So having gone through that battle once, he should know that whatever he does, right, he cannot beat the green wave based on religion alone. The real secret to beating the green wave is actually to provide people with a good rice bowl where they feel that they have a future, their children have a future, things are good, you know, how should I say, they're hopeful about the future.
Yeah.
You know, because the green wave is not about providing hopeful for the future. The green wave is essentially replacing the current system we have with a more Islamic or a purely Islamic system, which they say that will bring much better thing than what we have now. That's basically the green wave. A lot of people say that, oh, it's about, you know, certain parts of Islamic sects, all these things. For me, right, it's not really that, because a lot of the young people who support the green wave, I do not think those people have read through the Quran. I do not think those people understand religion deeply, Islamic religion deeply. But I truly believe that they believe that more Islam in Malaysia or Islamic type of country, right, will bring a better future for them.
Yeah. Prosperous.
Okay.
But they believe that that is the recipe.
That's right. That's right.
Okay,
because for them, right, the current system has failed them. You see what I mean? So they're willing to do that.
So the counter culture to this would be: this is the future forward. This is the better way of doing things. This is how we ensure bread and butter issue.
Yes.
The rice bowl, as you speak. And do you believe that the current administration is currently addressing
No,
that?
the problem with Anwar Ibrahim is he's still chasing the green votes. He's still thinking that, you know, he can win over the green vote by using more Islam. And what I'm saying is that that's fine, but your real rice bowl is that if the economy really grows, if the Kelantan fisherman, right, sees his income rising, or the Kelantanese farmer sees income rising, right, I can tell you he will drop past just like that, because he wants a better living standard for himself and his family.
What about the quarrelsome partners within the current unity government, between BN, predominantly UMNO, and DAP? I mean, the Najib episode just 2 weeks ago showed the deep discontent between these two partners.
Yes. Well, my position has always been that this is all wayang, it's not real, and I'll give a very simple explanation why it's not real. Let me ask you, Ibrahim, you being an observer of Malaysian politics for donkey years, okay, where does DAP stand?
That's not fair for me to say, but never mind, go on. I'm not
areas?
going to answer that. I don't
No, DAP stand in Chinese urban
Oh, Chinese urban areas. Yeah, okay,
right?
Sorry, I thought you were asking about on reformist issues.
No. I mean, where does DAP feel?
No. Urban areas, mixed seats.
Not even mixed seats, mostly mostly.
Mostly Chinese areas.
Where does UMNO feel that
mostly Malay areas.
Yes, rural area, right?
Yeah.
Do DAP UMNO fight?
Very rare. Almost unlikely. I can't remember one seat that they
so
go head-to-head.
So if when they attack each other, right, who is their audience? Their own supporters.
Their own supporters.
Because they know they're not going to beat each other.
Okay, I see what you mean. But it's the PKR folks that are in between the crosshair.
Look, put it this way. UMNO, people keep forgetting, has been a party of government since day 157. The only time it has spent time in the wilderness was very short, 2 years.
2 years, 2018 to 2020.
Right, yes. So UMNO as a political machine, as a political platform, right, is a platform built on the fact that they are part of a government, running the government, or being part of a government. They cannot survive outside the government ecosystem. If they do that, they're going to go down really fast. DAP, right, has been fighting to be part of government last 50 years or 60 years. They finally became part of the government in 2018. The first time, of course, you can argue that, you know, they got completely burned because they supported a guy who's 100 years old now. Right? He was trying to build UMNO 3.0. DAP was trying to build a new country, okay? DAP now have gone to government. They understand, how should I put it, how government works, how government can deliver for their own supporters. Do you honestly think that they want to get out of the government? Look, the only game in town in Malaysia, right? Nobody takes you seriously unless you're YB. If you're not YB, you can say whatever you are. People like me can say whatever I want. People just ignore because you're not YB. Secondly, if you're YB, right, the most important thing, right, is to be part of the ruling coalition. Why? Because you get your millions in constituency funding, right? If your kawasan, somebody got a sports association, you can sponsor the competition. That's why everybody wants to be part of the government. You can push JKL to build a new road, flyover, whatever it is. Do you think those are available to opposition? Of course not. Right? So everything in Malaysia, right? All the resources, everything. And of course, if you're part of the government, if you're YB, right? Of course, the perks are things like Datuk ship.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, right? It's much harder for the opposition to get. But my point is, right? The only game in town is to be in government. So I'm saying that all this talk about I'm not wanting to pull out DAP, getting angry with Madani, all these things, right? I would say a lot of this is speaking to their own audience. When the chips are down, the calculation is different. So I'll give you an example, right? If UMNO said that they want to pull out the government, right? What is the first thing that Zahid will be thinking about? Where am I going to get the money for the elections? Because I'm no longer DPM in charge of ministry. Secondly, right, half of my election machinery gone. Can you guess why?
Not in government, lah.
Because the government machinery doesn't serve you anymore.
Yeah.
We know in rural areas, right, government machinery routinely, support the party in power.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a fact. People can say, oh, it's unethical, it's this and that, but this is a fact, right? They will lose the government machinery. Do you really think he's willing to take the risk? If he's willing to take the risk, right, my only conclusion, right, he's got a daddy somewhere overseas who will give him a few $1 billion to fight the election. Other than that, I think it's very difficult. For the DAP, right, like I said, they've been waiting so long to be part of the government. Do you think they'll pull out the government? Because even though the Chinese ground are unhappy with them, right, the Chinese ground still think that having a big voice in government is quite important than having no voice. The big trump the DAP has with the non-Malay population is that they always remind the non-Malay population, yes, our influence may be limited because of Anwar, but don't forget that we are the biggest bloc. We can still get things done. It's just that sometimes we don't have to shout about it.
Final question, it's a rather simple, straightforward one. Are you more optimistic or less optimistic about the economy in 2026?
Okay. Generally, I'm always very optimistic about Malaysia, even though a lot of people don't think that's true. In terms of the economy, right, I think the economy will just, just float alone. You won't see any major reform this year because it's election year. So that is unfortunate. But again, the long-term stuff that I mentioned, the two hard basket, if Malaysia doesn't deal with it, right, it means that 10 years from now, you and I will be sitting same here talking about the same issues.
Thank you very much, James. That was Professor James Chin, the Adjunct Professor at the University of Monash, Malaysia, as well as a Senior Researcher at the University of Tunku Abdul Rahman. If you've missed out any part of this show or shows like this that you want to watch a little bit more, just head on to astroawani.com and find out more there. Until then, thanks very much for watching, and I wish you a Happy New Year.